Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú
The Ashen Forge. The Ashen Forge.
Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you two doing?
Doing all right. Got to see those nodes. Those are some sweet nodes.
Yes.
I wasn't sure how much they were going to show, but golly, like they just took it off and showed us all.
They did not show us all. They showed us a bunch of stuff.
They did.
I know what you're trying to do there. I think a big stream. This was one they delayed that we've been waiting on the heels of Freeholds. You're shaking your head there, Neuro.
No, I wasn't shaking my head. I was looking at chat and then my notes. So everybody, hey, what's up, everybody? I got a monitor like here. I got like monitors over here. And so if you see me looking around, I'm not like necessarily shaking my head unless I'm like, you know, something like that. I'm looking at chat. I'm looking at my giant set of notes that I put. If you want to see my giant set of notes, they are in our Discord. And I only got through the slideshow. Like that thing is dense.
Yeah, we have a lot of content at this point to go through. Where I was chatting with Neuro beforehand, like even stuff beyond what they planned. Like there's a couple of spots where Stephen hovers over something, and then you get a little glimpse of like Grandmaster. I wrote it down actually. Grandmaster metalworking and master this and that. It's like, oh, there's more. Okay, you weren't intending to talk about this, but there's more to look at. So it's one of those that's like going through every slide after slide to see what I can find. So, but yeah, Diggs, how are you?
Exhausted, but I'm here for now. Then I got to go dancing again. Then I got 3 different places to go dancing tomorrow. But I'm leaving here and going dancing tonight. I had a full day of classes this morning and dancing yesterday. I'm at a Camp Hollywood swing event. I thought I would be taking it easy this week, but then somebody gifted me a full pass to a swing event. So I've been doing Lindy Hop all weekend.
Yeah, for those of you who are unaware, Diggs is our resident dancer. I thought there was a slim chance didn't make it tonight, just too exhausted from a weekend of dancing.
Thankfully, it's close by, so.
But yeah, nodes. Yeah. We can go line by line. They had a lot of slides there, but I thought we would start just with overall impressions. You got something first, Diggs?
Yeah, no, we can get there. I think we'll get there. So let's start with your list. I think I can wait.
I don't want to say have a list. I'm just curious everybody's thoughts. You know, this was a big stream. This was as I've mentioned many times. This is the whole reason I back Kickstarter and Kickstarter was nodes. So,
well, let's see. I have a couple of things beforehand. One, disappointments. I was disappointed not to see Bill Trost. That's one kind of disappointment. And 2, a very interesting thing, which I think may come up kind of quickly, is we got both a PowerPoint and a little bit of a demo. I don't even think we have time to talk very much in depth about both. But the interesting thing that came up was that this does not mean that Alpha 2 is right around the corner. It's also not years away, which
that was the statement.
Be only 1 year away. So maybe we just have to wait until August of 2024. We'll have to see.
Yeah,
why would you start in August? There's, some little year before you get to like Halloween and then like the last 6 weeks of the year in game development are just like, yeah, I guess we got to keep working. And then at like the first 2 weeks of January is like shaking off this like 6-week bender and trying to get reoriented with the producers and leadership. So no, I I wouldn't imagine they would want to start in August.
I don't think they're going to start in March, but we'll see.
We will see.
I think you're on to something. Because also later on in Discord, Stephen, as he does, jumped in, kind of answered some questions, but commented on that they would have a couple more node streams prior to Alpha 2, which I guess if you take couple to mean 2, that would be at least 2. So when you start adding in the other things, they mentioned caravans soon, augments, tons of stuff. Like,
would be nice. Yeah.
I think you're right. Alpha 2, I had assumed maybe Q2 of next year. I'm not sure I don't think that's the case anymore. But we'll see. So that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about nodes.
I'm mostly teasing. Nodes is, all that. Alpha 2 is tied into nodes, but yep.
I think the part of Alpha 2 that's really critical with the node system is that it's the place where it's going to need to be tested. There's not that much they can do aside from like simulations to test it in-house and with Phoenix Initiative or whomever that they have available, friends and family, etc. That makes me think they have even close to enough data to really get things rolling. They have enough data and enough systems and stuff, hopefully, to support a giant player base. From what art style that we're seeing in the video, and you can kind of see a bit of it behind me here, I feel like it's from the stuff that we've already kind of been seeing from Alpha 1 and that they've continued to demo that I don't know how much they've gone into like Vec or Renkai or, those sorts of or Dunir sort of styles. And so that's or Pyre is the one that I think is going to be the most different of all. Everything's going to be grown. They don't cut down trees. They grow houses. So
Pyre and Nakua is going to be interesting. A science Nakua node is.
That's what I'm hoping to live in.
Right.
Just a city, never a metropolis. No need to knock us over.
Well, I would probably want Nakua racial progression to be finished, and I think you might need a metro for that. BWG 369 Science mentioned something in chat that I want to kind of touch on. They say I was floored by the art and complexity of building progression. Last couple of weeks, we had something about Asmongold in the forum saying that Ashes of Creation art kind of looks generic. Specifically, he said the Highwayman Hills looks kind of generic because it looks like basic UE5, Unreal Engine 5 assets, and it gets hard to tell the difference if you're looking at a human buildings in Ashes of Creation. It looks pretty much like any other Unreal 5 engine building for a human, like New World or Pax Day. They use the Tudor style buildings, and he was saying that for Highwayman Hills it would be nice to have something more unique and fitting the setting, and he suggested like zombie banners or pikes with zombie heads on it, or Minotaur heads on it, or something like that. Something that would make it fit a setting where you'd be like, oh, this is Ashes of Creation. And I'm bringing that up now because I was saying, I think in some ways it's true. UE5 buildings, human buildings kind of do look generic, but it's alpha. I expect Pyre building to look very different. I expect the Nakua area to look very different. Then you get regions and seasons and all of that. It's going to be better. It's just Highwayman Hills was not supposed to be a, hey, look how different we can make our setting apart from others. But for me, what we saw, was it Windmark? What's the name of the area that we saw?
Winstead
looked really cool, and I think they did a great job of making it feel. It did not feel like a New World town. I would not look at Winstead and go, "Oh, I wonder if I'm in New World." It looked very specific, and I was actually very impressed by how specifically they gave it a very Ashes of Creation feel.
Thinking about how they presented the progression systems and the different sorts of structures and expansions and all of that, it made me very much think about a strategy game. I was thinking about like your Warcrafts and your Command and Conquers and that sort of stuff, where in order to improve and get different types of units and upgrades for your units and unlock different types of tech that you can deploy and get going, that you have to build all these different prerequisites. But instead of those games where generally you can build everything and go in every direction, there's a manner of specificity going on into it. And then even with that specificity, there's a lot of short game versus long game. Am I trying to just make this place good for one sort of thing? Or are we looking at the long haul and we're eventually trying to build this up into a metropolis that has a ton of benefits that will pour downstream to all of the other nodes in the zone of influence? So instead of the major production happening here, we just maintain all of the upgrade structures and everybody else can make all the high tier stuff all the way down. And that's how we're going to do our, prosperous economic empire. That's the sort of stuff that I think is really intriguing is the ways that it can be prospectively built up for so many different purposes, so many different interests. If you're building up the place specifically to knock over the next place over, it'll be interesting to see places that start and then specialize in siege weapons.
Yeah, the building complexity, I mean, we can start there. I mean, certainly was far more than I thought. With the trees, I should have grabbed some pictures to put on stream, but with the selection trees, that it's exclusionary said. So if you go one way, you cannot go back to the other. Now the way around that is you can build a second building. So if you have a smithy and you go down one path, well, okay, you can build a second smithy, go down another path. But even then, because you're going to have such a limited number of spots, and when you look at those trees, they got very specific. I think one of them I wrote down was the Grandmaster Metalworking Crushing. Like that's where one of those could have ended up. Now you'll have apprentice, and you'll have journeyman, and you'll have some of the master. But the grandmaster path for that tree was crushing. I'm thinking, wow, that's like super, and that's just for metalworking. It's like, think of all the other buildings, and you're going to have limited number of spots. He had mentioned in the stream, well, if you wanted your node to be known for as the smithy of the area, well, you're not going to have enough spots to be the smithy. You're going to have some special, you can probably have a really good niche within a few areas, but which I guess makes sense, right? Because that gives, all of the nodes have a reason now to try to fill something. It's not going to be all the same. You are going to have very specialized, but that also in turn makes me wonder a lot more about freeholds. I know I had envisioned freeholds as you get your freehold, you get your permit, and you can kind of go to town, right? You can start doing stuff, but it's really going to be dependent on what buildings are located in wherever you're at and wherever they've specialized as to what your freehold can even do. So this just got super complex and planning and all of that. So
we're getting agreement with that in chat. Sheridan says it's interesting that the game will require a plan to grow cities, and Drunken Ninja 101 says they were blown away by how deep planning can go when approaching this game. So, yeah.
I mean, it's everything.
It seemed to me that people tend not to like dailies, but it seems like you can basically kind of have a type of daily just by trying to fulfill buying orders and commissions. All right.
Yeah.
You look to see what the node needs, and then you decide, okay, I'm going to try and fulfill this today.
Yeah, it did say for some of the things that are based on player participation that they only get to fulfill at one time while it's up. I think that was mandates in particular. So when you put up a mandated commission, players can fulfill that just once during that period that it's up. And once it's done, it can't be played again. They said it's kind of like cards that have a cooldown. So they can't play the same one again and just keep doing the same thing over and over.
Well, not at that one node.
Yeah, right.
You might want to do something if you're, person who chops down trees. You might do that for a variety of different nodes. But
yeah.
And that's the other thing, is that there's some thresholds between how much of this participation is coming from our actual residents and citizen, and how much of this participation is happening from people outside the node, because they'll be kind of rewarded differently. And I think the participation rewards will kind of be weighed a little bit differently as a result as well.
Yeah.
One of the big things, though, is the more people participate, the better the reward's going to be for the node. And participation is always guaranteed to give a reward. It might be just cash. It might be some extra resources. It might be a buff of some kind. It might be that you complete something and the mayor has some way to issue like a crafting buff or something for people who participate. Potentially something where they actually kind of cycle things together, where it's one that they put up to gather stone, one that they get to process it into bricks, and one that they get to have people build or whatever. And so there's different sets to it. Now that's another thing, though, that I'm wondering about. The buy order, it sounds like that's getting raw commodities, but I'm not sure how much it's also going to ask for refined things. And if refinement is done like in-house through some process, or if players are commissioned to do that.
Yeah, that was actually I had 3 questions answered during the stream. And one of them was about buy orders. Was it just raw materials? Was it processed materials? And they said it was both of those. It will not be final products, but it will be raw and processed, which again just starts to really tie back into freeholds and just all of the planning that you're going to have in how this works, and freeholds being even more important depending, I guess, on what you need in your area. But yeah, the main difference, the buy orders are just material goods, and commissions could be goods, but are also just quests, your dailies, as you put it, your simple quests. I think he used the word Sherwood Forest was his example of going out and securing the forest.
Rocket Start says they said in stream it's raw and refined.
Yeah.
Raw and refined.
Yeah, so the process
and refined. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then players wouldn't be doing the thing with the raw stuff. The raw stuff would just be applied. And there was some stuff I haven't really scrubbed through the video again to see all the nuances, but it looked like there was some interesting stuff with how you would set up the buy order. One of the things I saw was recipe, and that you would have like a mining tier 1 recipe or an apothecary tier 1 recipe. In fact, they don't even show us that list. I specifically noticed that they do a camera cut right there when apothecary is selected, and I think there's just 2 units of stone, and then it camera cuts to mining, and now it wants granite and halcyon. And so you can set how much of the materials that you want. But that's the thing that's confusing. Why is it being called a recipe? That might just be a system that's still in the works right now. Instead of calling it a mayoral mineral request or something like that, they just call it a mining tier 1 buy order recipe. Just
that's
internally,
a lot of space in a user interface. Shorter is probably better for Americans anyway.
Whatever they got to do to communicate it.
I thought it was interesting that they are 2 pieces, that you had a 1 and an A and a B, a 1 and a 2. Like, why 2 things? Why not 1? Why not 4? Like, how did you settle on 2?
And that again could be I think that might also be one of those systems that's in progress where eventually you can set, a larger variety and quantity of stuff and a larger payout or whatever based on how big the node's built up and that sort of stuff. Potentially, maybe not. Who knows what sort of scaling and stuff. Maybe you have to build up your political buildings to be able to do those sorts of things. Whatever those.
So what were your 3, Phantom? 1 was what?
Oh, the questions.
Your 3 questions that were
1 was the processed goods. 1 was the overall. 1 was whether anyone can do commissions. Which the answer that's yes.
And what was the answer for?
Yeah,
anyone can fulfill commissions.
Correct. So I had asked whether you had to be a citizen basically to do a mayoral commission. The answer is no. Now they will track that because the mayor does actually get things. They get mandates if their citizens do it, but it can be done by anyone. And there are not just mayoral commissions. That's what we saw. There's also just general node commissions as well. So that's kind of important to note the both. The other one was asked about.
And with that, I want to note the node commissions. That's where I imagine more of the land management related sort of things, like, oh, there's too many wolves, kill some wolves. That some NPC will say that. And so some of the things, even if you've got an inactive mayor, the node will still initiate things on its own to try to keep the balance in the area and mitigate the damage someone can do by like, all right, I'm the mayor, see ya. Or, oh no, I got the mayorship and now I got grounded.
And really, this was more of a mayoral dev stream than a node dev stream, but which is super interesting. I won't go down this road. I guess we could. I'll answer. So before I do that, the third one was the question about buying goods from other nodes, because there's node to node trading. And so Stephen kind of went down a rabbit hole of mayoral caravans and trading between nodes, which is possible. It takes a certain amount of rep and stuff, but yeah, a side note, this is more of a mayoral dev stream, which is super interesting considering it's going to be like less than 1% of the players ever actually see the UI to do this. So it's a lot of work for a small amount of people, but I understand it's obviously needed to make all of this work. You have to have that one person that either does right by you or does wrong by you in order to start a war. But yeah.
I mean, the interesting part of that is that Stephen loves PvP, but he also loves micromanaging guilds. And in this case, we're going to be micromanaging, or what he demoed was micromanaging the nodes.
It definitely seems like a full-time job to be a mayor. Unless they create some sort of app that makes it very easy to do from home or when you're not on the computer, I guess. Definitely otherwise seems very common.
I actually, when they first mentioned about mayor energy, the first thing that immediately popped in my head was Farmville and the little lightning bolt and the little 5-5 next to it, letting you know how much energy you've got right now to spend on little mayoral things. And I know that's not exactly what it is, but That is kind of the thing that I think about with the way that the mandate system is going to work. They give you a little bit at the start to get things rolling, and the more projects you get rolling, the more your not only the mandates that you have available, but your ability to get more mandates and do more stuff with it. But yes, there are some caveats to that. Maybe you just reelected a mayor that had a bunch of mandates, and it's like, all right, with my second term, I'm going to use all these mandates to drain the coffers and then declare war. Yeah, I'm just going to force everything through, and there's nothing you can do about it because I can veto every last vote because you let me sit around with so many mandates. That's the sort of funny thing that I'm interested, like, to what point can you actually like prevent those sort of things? If the mayor has actually declared war and nobody wants it, but it got forced through, is there some way that you can be like, no, we actually... We're going to bring out the mayor tarred and feathered. You can beat him up, and we'll just like pretend this never happened, right? Yeah, that's what I'm kind of wondering to see.
Yeah, I mean, we can get to the citizenship and some of the refugee stuff, but before we do that, because that kind of I think ties a little bit into what you're mentioning, or at least in my head, some curiosities that I had after watching that. Before that, though, I wanted to continue the buy order kind of thing a little bit before we move away from it. I think some of the big information, or what's interesting to me, is the idea of node currency and node reputation. That when we turn in these items, when we turn in commissions, when we turn in buy orders, we're not getting coinage in the normal sense. We're not getting silver and we're not getting gold. We're getting node currency, which is usable at any node. So it doesn't have to be just at the node that you obtain the currency. It can be in any node. But you do have to be a citizen of the node to use the currency, which is very interesting. I don't know how that's going to drive the random person who's just wanting to do quests. If they're earning something that they can't actually use unless they're a citizen, it's sort of forcing you in a way to being a citizen somewhere. Otherwise, you can't spend any of your currency. Which is an interesting take. The other was the node reputation, because how many times does Steven say, well, we have no reputation systems. There is no reputation, but there actually is node reputation.
I thought he said there's no faction.
Well,
there's no faction.
I tie faction and reputation in my head together. And so this actually turns out as a big deal. Like you will not even have access to certain. And this one, it sounds like, is per node. It's not just sort of a blanket node faction. It is to the node itself, and you will not be able to access certain traders, certain reagent people. If you have a freehold, you might not be able to access the trainer for that if you don't have the right reputation, which is interesting. So
the one of the things that's interesting, though, is that they said it sounds like there's actually zero limit on the amount of space in an inn. I was listening, and maybe they say later in the video, but during the slideshow part, it was seemingly that inns are unlimited, that the first limit comes to apartments. Both inns and apartments are a rent, such that if you stop paying rent, you just lose the spot. But if you have a house or a freehold, then you go into default first, so you have a period you can kind of get it back into your possession before it goes up for somebody else to be able to get. I'm going to mute that. The other thing is the inn being at the start portal, that you don't even have to be a resident of a player-built, a player-developed sort of place. Apparently, the place that you start, the starting portal, or I would imagine the under depths where the Tolnar were hanging out, has an inn you can be a resident at. I would imagine it's always going to be the lowest price available, because the inn cost will increase as the node improves and advances. And so with that, the thought came to me, well, of course, Diggs is going to be a resident of the place where he starts. That's where he's going to set up his inn with his level 1 character. And that's it.
Well, a few things there. So one is, it's a room at an inn. I think the the verbiage was a little interesting because everybody gets an inn makes it sound like literally.
I'm sorry. Everybody doesn't get an inn that you own.
No,
you can get a room.
But you're saying it the way Steven said it. Steven said you can get an inn, but I think it's supposed to be a room at the inn.
Yes, definitely.
So it's one level down from an apartment, kind of.
Well, it's the lowest tier.
Well, what I'm saying is it's a room. It's probably a smaller room than an apartment would be, right? An apartment building. I would think it's probably more of a studio than a,
Yeah, well, they actually even quantified that an inn basically gives you a bit of a place to store your stuff and very, very limited furniture usage. An apartment not only gives you a little bit more space and a little bit more ability to put furniture, but as the apartment building itself is improved by the mayor and is, if you decide to opt for like a penthouse or a nicer place in the apartments, then you'll be able to get better and better accommodations to the point where they said, with might need a penthouse suite or whatever to be able to put in legendary furniture. And I got to say, legendary furniture sounds like a perfect place to store your legendary neurotoxins. It's like, that's a great plan.
Exactly. So typically when I play MMORPGs, the first thing that I do is run from my racial starting area over to some other racial starting area, and then start there. So if I'm in a halfling village, I'll run over to a dwarven village and start leveling. Actually, do the starter level quests from somebody else's starting, some other race's starting. So I don't normally stay in my own starting area. Two, when I saw you type that in Discord, I was thinking, I wonder how many rooms can we have? How many inn rooms can we have? Can I have one at each starting area? Because I might be more likely to run from each one.
Seemingly can only have one residence because you may only be a citizen of one location.
But I won't be a citizen of a starting area.
Yeah, you citizenship is not tied to owning housing. Housing is required to be a citizen. So you could have. I think what you're going at is correct, Diggs.
You're right.
Yeah, I think you could own multiple apartments. You could own multiple freeholds. Wait,
I don't think
not
so.
Freeholds, but apartments. Well, you could own an apartment. You can own a freehold. You can own
exactly
one of each of these things.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. So, but I think my apartment would have to be tied to a node, and I would probably have to be a citizen. Well, I don't think I can have an apartment in multiple nodes, but I'm wondering if I can have an in room at multiple starting areas. That's what I'm wondering. So that's a question I'm going to have to ask, because I might do that. And I could kind of see myself maybe cycling from one starting area to another just to see what newbies are up to and talk to newbies about what they're doing and kind of help out. I'm not exactly sure how I would help out newbies if I'm not going to actually be killing stuff, but I might just run from starting area to starting area and see how it changes over time. And I would love to maybe, have people over, and if I can have a different apartment, then I would probably try to decorate them differently, and hopefully I can have some food there and have some parties there. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, inns I think are definitely the compromise of how to get citizenship to work when you have limited housing. I just sort of have to introduce this, basically.
Well, the downside of that for me is that, one of the things that has me hyped about Ashes of Creation, specifically in terms of housing, is these open world homes. And that it seems to me that instead of needing looking for group mechanic, we should know where people live who play in our node at the same time that we do. So I should be able to go to their freehold or go to their house and find them doing whatever it is that they like to do there and say, hey, we need to go get some more wood. Let's go out and go get some wood. Or, hey, these wolves are doing some stuff, so let's go out and, get rid of these wolves. We shouldn't need looking for group if we can actually find people at their homes. And I think that's kind of a downside with apartments in games like EverQuest and World of Warcraft, in that you don't necessarily you go to one building kind of, and then it sends you into an instance. And I think it's kind of harder to find people if you're just going to an instance and hoping they're there versus actually going to an open world home. And maybe if they aren't there, you get to go and help them with their farming, literally, their gardens, or whatever. Maybe you take advantage of some of their stations or something. But so I don't know. It's kind of a negative for me that everybody has access to it in room. That might be more difficult to find people actually in the game because they might be in an instance instead. But
I think that might be one of the other reasons why inns are meant to be so plain and austere, is that there isn't a reason to hang out there. You aren't gonna spend 20 hours doing decoration there because you can only put 5 tier 1 decorations in. It's great. All right, so I've got my bed, coffee pot. I think I got a toilet somewhere. I got a table and a chair, and all right, that's my inn. It might even just come with that stuff.
Oh, it might be a little bit more than that. I mean, they are shared spaces, so you can bring friends into your inn the same as you can to your apartment, and presumably you'll still be able to place things like a bed that gives you EXP bonus or whatever it was they've commented on in the past, but obviously
that's the only thing you'll be doing with your friends in your inn room, probably.
I don't know. We'll see how big they are. It really reminds me again of EverQuest 2. Going into their instance housing, you rent them. It's a single room, 2-room, still plenty of space to decorate. Who knows how big these will be? The other thing with EverQuest 2 that made it easy was you were able to join your friends, so you could join them in their in room, basically warp to them. That obviously probably will not be a thing in Ashes, but so yeah, citizenship I think is probably their main purpose at this point, so that you can access certain things within the nodes that you need access to. But yeah, you were talking about the mayor and what if they're do something wrong, how do we, obviously there's the whole process of mandates and being able to block things. But what I thought was interesting, they talked about this whole refugee system of if your node, if there's a node war and you lose, you become a refugee. So you don't have the normal cooldown, because you can renounce your citizenship as well. But they didn't specifically say, I think the wiki says 30 days. It's somebody I think had commented it's a long period of time. And it's purposeful so that you don't just sort of jump from place to place and disrupt stuff. But you become refugee status. So that makes me wonder, okay, if I'm just tired of this town, this mayor I just went out, somebody's declared a siege. Do you just do nothing? I'm not going to help. I'm going to let it go to hell. And then I become a refugee. I don't have to wait. I can go on to the next town over and become a citizen.
There's lots of for that. Yeah.
if you already took the time to set up a home over there and start carting over all of your possessions and worldly goods, one horse ride at a time, then yeah, when it comes time to renounce your citizenship, it's like, all right, y'all can have my empty lot. Peace out. Have a good time with the war. Have fun having your castle stormed.
Yeah, I would imagine that if you don't like your mayor, you would not defend a siege. There's probably several reasons why you might not. So, like, for one thing, I think what happens if you're a dwarf who hates elves, and when your town pops to a city, instead of being a dwarf city, it's an elf city, you probably are gonna not defend a siege there because you'd rather some dwarves try and come and take it over, right?
Or you can come and take it over through participation. If you've got a 2-to-1 dwarf population and the dwarves are the active ones, next time it upgrades, bam, knock down all your pretty marble columns and put up some nice stately stone. Some nice granite. Nice party.
Yeah, and I should clarify what I just said. So if you just let someone come in and let them be successful in their siege, your node is gone. There is no rebuilding it. It's de-leveled down. So I'm not necessarily saying, hey, invite someone in to come, take over, and you still have the same NPCs as you did yesterday. But it gives you a way to become a citizen much faster somewhere else and continue your progression. If you should go that way. But I guess that is part of the intended gameplay of trying to keep people happy and trying to undermine people if you can.
But that's not necessarily undermining. It's just, you aren't supporting if you don't like the direction that your node is going in, and you.
I have now envisioned myself if I can't get freehold.
We know you're going to undermine. I'm just saying, in general, it doesn't mean that you have to. There are many reasons why you might choose not to support your node, and instead of you don't have to do anything actively to knock it down, but you might not support it, and that would mean that you might become a refugee rather than having to renege your citizenship. You can just wait to become a refugee, and then you'll become the citizen of another node much more quickly. That's fair.
Sorry, I'm typing. I don't know, but yeah, I imagine, because also I started thinking of this. This is another theoretical process of, if you're tired of the mayor, like, can you just get a bunch of friends to come over and get in rooms, become citizens, and then every time a mandate comes up to vote on, you just say no? Like, how hard would that be? How many numbers of people would you have to recruit to constantly vote no?
At a town level, you could probably get some guildies to do it. At like the city metropolis level, we're talking about hundreds to thousands of players. Not so easy. Probably much easier to do with the lower levels.
Sounds to me like Phantom might be starting his own religion.
Well, the religious nodes have the divine favor, which is a PvE thing, to become a mayor. So it's hardcore PvE to become the mayor. I think that's probably an avenue I could see Phantom X doing. So yeah,
hardcore what? No.
Hardcore PvE. You go and do PvE. You go and bash the environment real hard. In favor and support of some divine whatever, and then it's like, all right, we are not the Church of the Sandal anymore. We are the Church of the Boot.
The church. He said something that. This was one of my side note favorite quote that he said is, "I'm just a sandal wanderer." I hope they make that some sort of title for him, the Sandal Wanderer. That would be amazing. You just see a shimmering gold glow as this golden sandal comes trekking your way. But anyways, another side note, one of the things I enjoyed most seeing was a delete button. I don't know if that will stay. We're not able to drop stuff on the ground, right? That's something that we've been told we're not able to pick up, drop, trade that way. But I had always wondered, okay, well, is there a delete button? And Stephen was trying to was buying something and he couldn't get it to work. So he deleted a few items and he had space. Because I've also always had this vision when we talk of land management. Well, if you really piss me off, okay, I'm going to form a guild, and our sole purpose is land management warfare. We're going to come.
Yeah, you're going to throw 10,000 logs straight in the void.
We're going to
come
chop
through
everything down and hit the delete button. Delete. And just tear it apart, see what happens. And you can kill us if you want, but because we're deleting everything, there's going to be absolutely no benefit to you. You're not going to get anything from us. And
because you can't declare players as an enemy of the state without it being part of a siege where you're common enemies, there's no kill this guild on site sort of thing unless there's some way land management actually allows for it. And again, kill on site, whatever. It's already been deleted.
Well, correct. So we had some further clarification on that too, because I was going to mention this for you, Diggs. I don't know if you paid attention to this because everybody had talked about making Diggs kill on site. If they were mayors, they're not going to be able to do that. That is not allowed. You can only PvP if you've declared a node siege, node war. Then there's sort of somewhat of an equivalent, but you can't just randomly declare someone as enemy of the state and set your guards to kill them.
Yeah, that was my question, by the way.
That would actually be a really funny one for the a military type node, that you actually can issue at a higher level a contract to kill a specific entity. And normally it's supposed to be used for all right, let's go as a city, go kill this giant dragon here that's got a bunch of dragon buddies. We're going to need, hundreds of people for this, that sort of thing. But then instead they use the contract. All right, kill Diggs. Contract allows me to pick players.
Well,
a tier 5 city military is now hunting them.
Presumably, as long as you never declare yourself a citizen.
That's what I'm saying.
You can't be even if there's a node war, even if they say, well, Diggs is part of this node next to us, so we're just going to declare a node war just because we want to be able to kill him. If he's not a citizen, you can't. That's
right.
He can. Everything else will apply. You can certainly PK him if you want, but you can't set your NPCs to just kill him if they see him. I mean, he could come walking down your street just the same as anybody else. So it'll be very interesting to see how a lot of these systems play out. I am very curious about pushing the land management system as far as I can to sort of Lord British levels, Ultima Online levels of killing everything just to see what happens. And just
that is definitely a concern. How do you make the game populated enough that when players do come in initially, you don't just blight the areas immediately?
Mm-hmm. And a lot of this is tied to happiness too. So presumably, if I come in and disrupt the local ecology, the NPCs will be unhappy, and so that's going to restrict quite a bit on what the mayor, I forget what it was, if it was mandates or commissions. One of them is based off happiness. I think it's commissions maybe, but there's so much to explore here. It's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, I was very happy to see delete button, because that means my system could work of revenge, a revenge guild.
Might not make it to launch. Everything's subject to subject to change. So they could make it that there isn't.
If you can't drop it,
why? Why'd you pick it up?
Oh, that would just be terrible. That would be absolute nonsense. Talk about quality of life. Anyways,
well, it is definitely a concern about if you create limits to the resources needed for various sinks and people are intentionally destroying them, like, is that one of the ways, for example, to start promoting corruption in an area? That destroyed materials that aren't either they're deleted by players or a player died somewhere, and after like 24 real world hours, the body just finishes decomposing and the resources are gone. Nobody picked them up. If they have something like that, then I could see be either a way that promotes corruption or maybe empowers the enemies in the area. Now they can build better resources and, tools and structures and all of that. And so by doing that, you're basically helping to promote the bandits and stuff in the area, which may not be a bad thing. It might actually be a way to open up new quest lines and new opportunities. Like the story guys, definitely watching things. So, might actually think about putting something like that in. Oh, you've destroyed so many resources in this area. Great. Well, turns out the bandits actually got them all. Now you've got super bandits you've got to deal with. They're like, level 35 bandits in an area that's normally level 20-ish. Like, this is a big problem. Or they're elite tier when they were normally just, kind of weak things you could knock over solo. So that could be an interesting way to utilize that. Like, it's an alternative sink. The more you delete, the more you make things tougher. And that might lead to corruption because you've made the enemies tougher and they keep getting, more and more gains from that.
That's kind of an interesting concept to think about. I think in terms of quality of life, you have to have some way of getting rid of the too much inventory in your bags. Now, is there a weight? We know that there's some kind of thing as to is it how many items will fit in your bag versus weight? Did he say there's not weight, or is there both?
I don't remember if there was weight. If I remember, there was like a completed item limit, perhaps, and then a resources shoved in bags. But then resources shoved in bags, it wasn't clear what the stacking maxes were. Like, maybe this bag you can put 20 feathers in a stack versus a default just general resource bag you can put 3 feathers in a stack, and so you got to spend a lot more room on feathers at that point. So that could be one of the ways that it plays out.
Yeah, it's not.
But I don't think there's actually a weight. I could be mistaken. The other reason why weight is something that might be desirable to avoid is because it inevitably means that light armor is easier to carry around, but that mechanically sucks because that means it's easier to carry around magic resist and like your medium, like everyman kind of split the different sort of gear, but you're more like physically resistant gear. You're more like front row tanky sort of stuff. Incurs an extra weight penalty. I don't know why they would want to have something like that. That kind of sucks and is maybe a little counterintuitive to the idea that like a wizard could be wearing plate armor for an encounter, for example.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with the wizard wearing plate armor if they want to do physical
that's
stuff.
Great.
Yeah, Galwood says there's no weight, it's space and stack sizes. So that means there's no encumbrance. So we won't go from being able to run to being stuck walking due to having too much weight.
Yeah, that's likely not the case. There might, if there is an item that you have obtained that is like the lodestone of slowness, but also like giant value. It's like, oh no, I have this thing. I can only go 25% move speed, but if I get it to a vendor, it's payday. So that I could see maybe items like that there's specialty cases, but in general, no, I feel like that would be closer to basically having a debuff applied just for having things in your backpack.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, because, in something like New World, Neverwinter Online, I would think you would become encumbered. So then you're trying to drop stuff. If you can't drop stuff, then you're kind of stuck. If you're only, walking instead of running. But if you're not going to become encumbered, then that's not as much of an issue.
Gosh, we're almost.
There was one thing it stuck out to me. This will be one of the ones, maybe I'll ask it for the next live stream or something. Steven refers to something early on in the stream, templated skill shots. What are templated skill shots? What the hell are templated skill shots? I can't search for that meaning somewhere. There is not a term templated skill shots. What the hell does that mean in the context of hybrid combat? Like, what? Huh? I am confused.
Yeah, that was the first thing I was going to bring up. So we had a nice lengthy discussion about that in the forums. What is a skill shot, and whether something that is a ground telegraph can be shot. Is that a shot? Can it be aimed? Because I think it first came up because of an X question that came up in the forums. That was, what did you think of Divine Flare, which is an aimed skill shot, but it's really a telegraph. And some Solverin, I think, was saying it's a telegraph. It moves along the ground. You don't aim that, you place it, and you don't shoot it, you place it. So how is it a shot? That's not a skill shot. And so colloquially, I get it. Sometimes people aren't precise with their language, but lots of people were defending, well, you do aim it. I'm like, technically you place it, and technically you're not going to shoot it through the air. You're going to slide it across the surface.
Yeah, here's the thing that I think about with it is, let's break this back down into tabletop role-playing terms. At its very core, when I think of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder use similar sort of systems, there's two methods that you can put the hurt on somebody: an attack or something that forces a saving throw, like a cone of cold or a fireball or something like that, that either affects a target or affects an area, but it's not a hit or miss. It's, this thing is affecting you. Maybe you get half the effect if you do the saving throw. Maybe it's a cantrip or something. You get no effect if you do the saving throw. That's great, but you have no option. This is forced upon you, versus an attack. You're trying to hit the thing. If you roll a miss, you missed. You roll a hit, you hit. Roll for damage. And so I kind of think of it along those terms is something that would be able to have a sort of skill shot to it, or something that is a critical hit of sorts that you are able to initiate through position or some other sort of characteristic. I liken that more to an attack. Attacks can have critical strikes to them. Spell attacks or the saving throw spells don't. A fireball in D&D does not have a critical hit effect. There is no such thing for it. But if you hit somebody with a fire bolt, which is an attack, I believe you can hit that with a critical. Not in the new 6th edition wackiness, because they took crits from spells, I believe. But whatever, I'm not playing that. But it's specifically the phrasing for a templated skill shot. Did they ever come to what the templated part means?
They're talking about a telegraph, like a telegraph AoE, like Divine Flare, which is, it's a AoE circle that you move along the ground and place it, and then it will do something.
Okay.
Template. That's what they mean by template.
Okay. So where they
sure.
where they put the decal on the ground for where the effect is going to be. Okay. Templated skill shots. Okay. That's a phrase they're going to need to put in the wiki, because when I looked up templated skill shot, I was like, what in the hell am I even like? Google's like, what do you mean skill shot without templated? No, templated skill shot. It's like, yeah, no. We can get the same words in like the same page, but they're never in sequence like that. So that kind of threw me off a little bit.
It's like primary archetype versus class, right? They have their own kind of terms for stuff. And again, divine flare is not an attack; it's a heal. And again, it's not a heal that is shot through the air. It's not really a heal that you're not really aiming it at somebody. So, but people aren't always precise with how they speak. So,
what about ball lightning?
It's okay.
You're aiming that. It's slow as hell.
Right, and it moves, but I don't remember how that is. Is it placed or aimed? I don't remember.
Doesn't matter. It's going a direction you aim it. You point it one way or the
other. Ball lightning goes in the direction that you're facing when you cast it, I believe.
It still takes skill.
Is it?
Oh yeah, it definitely takes skill. But the thing we were seeing is that they would, I believe it was the ball lightning to cast early and then jump in and do something to get some stacks on. By the time the ball lightning gets there, it'll hit and do its thing too. So some of that sort of stuff, or when you've got the groups and you've got the enemies lined up, it's like, all right, well, if they're just going to sit here, ball lightning.
Yeah, from my take on the forums is that most people seem to think at this stage we're probably not going to get what they would call active, or not, more skill-based combat. Like that the hybrid system is not what some of the more hardcore people were envisioning. Which is, I guess, probably true. You're going to get more tab targeting, and then these sort of things that you're commenting on, Diggs, as where this seems to be going. So
I don't know, because I thought you said there were more action stuff, or you said there were more healing stuff, not necessarily action. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, have we seen much of anything at this point? I guess there was the Ranger. Didn't they have a shot that was kind of a free? I thought they had a free shot ability, but anyways, where you could plan ahead. But sorry, the specific terms were leaving my brain. But it seems to be like everyone feels this is probably getting less sort of action and more of the more typical tab hybrid type based, which is fine with me. But it's also interesting when you hear, actually I heard him talk about this today when you listen to Narc talk, that they still haven't also told us the final weapon list for Alpha 2. I wonder how that all ties in with how they feel their combat systems are playing. So
he's probably sitting there, I want my potion launchers. We're not doing Alpha 2 without the potion launchers.
I think there's a lot of reasons he's saying we're not doing Alpha 2. I've commented on this in Discord quite a bit. Palia, Wayfinder, perfect examples of why it's taking so long. 2 games that did not officially release. One went into early access, one went into open beta. And of course, everyone treats them as a release game, and everyone shits on them when they are not perfect. And so 100% you can see where Steven is taking his time, because once it's out there, you're not going to be able to take it back. So,
especially in early access, that is again in the form of it's going to be up until release, right? That's the kind that everybody really hates. Well, it's basically a release. What's the difference? I can play it. If I can play it, then I should be able to critique it as if it's a released game.
I worked with an engineer on a project one time who was like, all right, I really need to get access to the Steam stuff so I can put builds out. And it's like, okay, I kind of want to look at the business numbers. And as soon as he got access to, I think it was like the financial or dev side of things, he pushed it from early access to launch. It's like, dude, your product's not ready yet. Why did you do that? There's no backsies on Steam. It's like, what do you mean? People are using it and paying for it. It's a released product. All right, bro. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okie, you're the genius here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are at the end of our time. We barely got anywhere in all this. There's still all of the mayorships, the scientific notes, how the mayors are elected. We really didn't get into mandates, commissions, all of this, policies. We didn't even talk about policies.
We're going to be talking about this for a while. We're going to be talking about this after the next live stream, I think.
Yes.
So I do have a question, though, because we were thinking of last time talking about expectations. Did this meet expectations? And did it exceed expectations? How did this do?
I would say it met my expectations. There are a couple of things maybe I wanted to see a little bit more of, but I can understand that they're either not ready to show just yet or maybe still not quite as polished yet. Like, I would like to see more racial influence from some of the other races and some of the structures and some of the developments. And it might be that this is just the stuff that's the most polished. They've been using it in all of their internal demos and like internal press dealies and whatever that they do, focus groups, etc. So I can understand having one solid polished set, and for that one to be the one that's like the most familiar to Western fantasy players and developers. But that's the one thing that I'm kind of hoping to see a little bit more of, some of those different influences. And then the other thing, just a real quick, they had showed, I want to say on Twitter like a week or two ago, it was, I think the Vec version of the one of the outfits that we see. Yeah, and it's like, well, it looks cool, but I didn't know that we had like the day and the night theme depending on who you're playing, because it was like the colors were completely on the dark side instead of being on the light and bright side. And that to me is like, well, wait a minute, that's a switcheroo. If I wanted my character looking like the first one, but they look like the night mode version, like, what's going on with that? Is that something? And then that also gets back to like the whole thing about September being the last time they're doing the Alpha 2 packs, and the September FAQ is going to have all the details on what's going on. And then Steven saying that there might not even be the end of Alpha 2 sales. It's just going to cease it for the moment. It might return later down the road. Whatever that means. I mean, I guess it's better to qualify that than to say this is the end period and then realizing that wasn't actually the right decision. But I'm wondering if they're going to cut it off now and then start reaching out to people with the Alpha 2 packs to start getting like polling for interest and that sort of stuff, for example. And so to kind of cut it off and have a large, but a selected core group of people who have already put the investment and the interest in to be the group that they're now going to be asking the hard questions and using that information to help pace towards what Alpha 2 is going to have in its initial presentation and what they're going to roll out at what times during the Alpha 2.
Sounded like
interesting times.
Yeah, it sounded like they wanted to make sure servers and concurrency worked. I think he specifically mentioned concurrency, and then it's just good business sense, right? Like if everything's going great, people love what they see. Are you really going to not accept their $250 to get in and start play testing? No, that would be dumb. And Steven's not dumb, so it's actually quite smart, because he says we're trying to not do FOMO. That's not the point here, but you're getting both. You are getting FOMO, And you're also laying the groundwork that, well, we might open this up later, so that you can't have people come back later and say, well, you lied to us. Well, no, we mentioned months ago that we might open it back up. So you kind of get both, which is really...
Yeah, it's an odd sort of like FOMO with maybe backsies. It's definitely better to put in FOMO with maybe backsies than to just be like, nope, hard stop, that's it. No more, and then like, well, we got to kind of roll that one back a little bit here. But also, as we had talked about last time, I do see that as a potential part of consolidating their resources as much as possible towards Alpha 2, that instead of having to continue designing and creating and modifying all of the new cosmetics and then fit them for all the different peoples and their varieties and characteristics, that they kind of cut that off. They get whatever they're going to get in for the moment. They don't even have to put all of those. They don't even have to put any of those in the Alpha 2, to be perfectly honest. We don't need to have any of our cosmetics during Alpha 2. So they can just stop that and just put all resources possible on all the stuff that they need to get everything ready for Alpha 2 from the related teams. So that's maybe one of the other things that I'm seeing from it. And I know people might be disappointed if they don't see their cosmetics in Alpha 2. Maybe they'll come later. I would hope they come later as part of testing. It's good to be able to have, a large volume of players test all of your skins and mounts and all of that sort of stuff. So that one wacky, odd build that's got some, odd no-name brands version of a niche graphics card or whatever. They're running on like a NVIDIA Quadro because they do different sort of processing and they just happen to play on that machine. For some reason, that makes all the normals on the horses get reversed, so they're all flipped around and weird and stuff and invisible in different ways. And it's like, yeah, okay, well, it's great that we had that one player with that one niche system test it, so that way it could be that much more ready. But to have that on day one of Alpha 2, nah, I don't think that's a priority whatsoever. I'm not actually expecting to see them there whatsoever.
So, Diggs, to answer your question,
yeah, mm-hmm.
What we saw looked good. We saw harvesting to, the buy order, to the building being created and actually using the building to craft. So what we saw, I think, looked remarkably well, certainly compared to previous, to like Alpha 1. Visually looks much better, much more advanced. I'll point out that we saw tech, 2004? Not 2004, 4 years ago. I was trying to do the math in my head. 4 years ago was the Node Tech demo, where we got to see them switching the different nodes based off of racial.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was
2019.
Yeah, YouTube just says it was 4 years ago.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
But so I was disappointed in not being able to see a node change, either from village to city or whatever. I was very hopeful we would get to see that sort of progression of buildings changing over time. Is it similar as the one building that's being built? Do they start hammering all these different places? And, does it, whatever. We didn't get to see that. Presumably, that is one of the other streams. He mentioned there'll be multiple more node streams. So presumably that will be one of them. So I was a little disappointed in that, but
I was thinking we might only see a PowerPoint. So getting to see some demo of.
Yeah, there had to be gameplay. That I think I said that when we were chatting about expectations. Like if they just did that and there was no game, like no footage, that would have been a disaster. People would have been screwed.
People would not. Yeah, they would not have enjoyed that as much. I would have still gotten a ton of notes and stuff out of it, but to not show video, to not even have screenshots, like that would have been, there would be pitchforks, torches.
So, the other, and my only question, again, Bernie, what is the podcast? Burning Discussion. Is that right? Stephen will be joining, is it Yokai Theater on
the 10th?
Yes. So coming up. And there is a forum post where you can add questions to see if they'll ask. I only put one question in there. And this is, I think, would help me better understand where we're at in this whole process is, they very intentionally stayed away, as you pointed out, Diggs, from certain parts of the drop down. No, Nero, you pointed out. So, could they actually go in and instead of a smithing building, do a woodshop building, like do the whole same process, put out the requests, and can we go see that woodshop being built? Or is this more of a demo? And we really only had one building, was kind of pre-made to happen. Like a la EverQuest Next, where we saw a lot of gameplay that was actually just scripted demo work. Like, is that what we're seeing? I would have loved to have seen more than one building get put up. And actually on the UI, it's interesting. Before they even started the construction process, it said they had one of two active. So it would appear as though there was somewhere else something was being built. So I don't know. That would be my other question, though. So,
and like you said, it would have been nice to have seen, if it's not just something that's scripted, it would have been nice to have seen them go from one stage to another. Yeah. So
we'll see if that question gets asked and answered.
That's an interesting kind of concern.
I don't know.
See.
When you see only one, it just feels like, okay, because I think it says something if this is just a demoed one type of building, and here we are with however many different types of buildings that still have to create everything for.
And I'm saying we really only saw one stage of one race. So yeah, that's a concern. Right. How do we get it kind of goes back into my head of how do we get a kind of feel of how close to Alpha 2 are we? And it would, I think, help us feel better if we could see things like this, like, at least one city go through several stages, but also from different racial, because I think we didn't really see that in Alpha 1. Did we ever see a racial difference based on dominant race?
Remember any places looking particularly different based on who had taken over? Maybe the NPCs that populated it were just a little bit more different. I don't really recall. But yes, NPCs was one of the things. Depending on who took over a place, it would have certain NPCs, or those certain NPCs would either be maybe found somewhere else, or you just wouldn't get them on that world. I actually remember that the way it had progressed on one server, certain NPCs were available in an area. They gave good quests, gave good resources. There was like a decent sized chain to it. Then when that server was borked for a moment and we all hopped over to a different server, things progressed differently. Those NPCs weren't even there. And it's not that they had their thing satisfied and they were gone. It was that different people built up different places. And even though it got up to the same tier, it took a different influence and didn't have the same folks running it.
Last thing I'll point out before we start to get out of here, I thought this was funny. I don't think many people caught it. I assume it was a joke. I wish I had asked this question just to see Steven's response. But when you looked at the UI for the mayor, I think there's like a dues date, like when the next whatever date is due, and it was 1/31/2030 is when the next.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Yeah, 2030. Was when their upkeep payment or whatever it was is due next. So that made me laugh.
And they also wanted to give 10 million years to complete the mandate
2 million.
Or whatever.
2 million. 2 million.
So
I think it was 2 million days. 2 million days, which is still kind of crazy.
2 million days, yeah.
All right. Well, this was a great stream. We will be back next Sunday. We have so much to talk about. I mean, there's, like I said, even within just the crafting, that sort of I don't know. There's just tons of stuff to talk about. Plus, we're going to have a show, an interview to look at and see what interesting questions are answered there. So we are definitely in a time of information dump. Unfortunately, I don't think that means we're any closer to an Alpha 2. If anything, it's becoming just much more apparent of how far away we are, but that's fine. It'll come. So everyone, thanks for joining us, and we will see you back here next Sunday.
See you. Very much. Happy 30 years, Digital Extremes.